In this video, I want to talk about ancestral trauma. So a lot of the work that I do deals with the subconscious mind and finding our inner beliefs, wounds, and traumas that keep us stuck from manifesting what we want, and particularly focusing on relationships. And recently, a lot of what's been coming up is this concept of ancestral trauma. So this is trauma that we basically inherit, for better or worse, from our ancestors, from our lineage on our mother's side and our father's side. So in this video, I'm going to focus particularly on the feminine trauma, and I'm going to do another video for the ancestral male trauma. So what's been coming up a lot for me lately is my own recognition of ancestral trauma relating to the feminine. So I wanted to share a little bit about that with you guys in case it can be relatable or helpful for you guys out there. I've also been discussing this with some of my feminine friends, and they resonated a lot with it. So I think that this could be really helpful for women out there to know about. So the traumas that we have in our body, basically they happen through our lifetime, but we also get them from our genetics. So if you know anything about epigenetics, it's basically things through the environment or through experiences that get stored in our DNA and creates our patterns of belief and our behaviors, why we act the way we do. So one thing that, for example, I've been noticing with feminine ancestral trauma is I come from a Middle Eastern background, and so my ancestry is very much used to this dynamic where there's a powerful masculine provider male and then a feminine sort of supportive emotional support female. And I know a lot of different ethnicities and nationalities can relate to this dynamic because it's kind of how things have been going like the last few hundred years. So some of these traumas look like limiting beliefs, such as, because I'm a woman, I can't outdo a man. And of course it's not conscious, it's subconscious stuff that I've been working on releasing with myself. And the more I do this, the more I'm noticing I'm attracting more abundance, more of everything I want to manifest, basically. So some of my ancestral trauma relating to this Middle Eastern culture is related to the idea that you can't outdo a guy, right? If I'm smarter than a man, or if I make more money than a guy, then maybe he won't want me, or I'll end up alone, or I'll be single forever, or whatever crazy beliefs we might have subconsciously that keep us from being in our power. And this is stuff that's not just, it might not make sense today, but this is stuff that actually was really an issue for our ancestors, for my ancestors. So things like if you were married to a man and say this man wasn't treating you well, you couldn't actually leave because there weren't any laws to protect a woman. If a woman wanted to get divorced or to, find her own freedom, she would have to risk being thrown out on the street and not having a way to support herself. So a lot of this trauma is related to fears of, as a woman, like, is it safe for me to express myself the way I really want to? Like, can I be powerful without, being thrown out, risking starvation or death, and, things like this. So a lot of things that seem maybe like irrational or crazy, like for this day and age, but because it's things that our ancestors went through, it's stuff we have to address and go internal and release energetically, subconsciously. And this is what I love using hypnotherapy for and tantric yoga for, because when you use these spiritual practices, these practices that show you your unconscious and actually take you regress back to the memories, to these things that you experience, and you shine the light of awareness on them, and then you're able to release them and heal. And it's absolutely magic what happens when you up-level these beliefs, these traumas, and heal beyond them. You find just this liberation, this power beyond what you might have thought possible. So I want to discuss some common themes that the divine feminine women face with ancestral trauma. So starting with money, finances, and security. So a little bit of what I just mentioned. Some of the things that as women we need to address with healing our ancestral trauma is this idea about money, finances, and security. Sometimes women might carry this belief that if I earn a lot of money, then that somehow makes me less attractive, or that might intimidate a man. And this is usually actually tied with the double bind of, if I don't make any money or I'm not successful, then no man will want me, or I'm not going to be able to attract a partner. So it's super important to recognize that you are able to create your own abundance, be financially independent, and that actually will attract the right masculine partner to you, because you'll attract someone who resonates with that level of creating your own financial freedom, your own self-sufficiency. Unfortunately, a lot of what women have been doing throughout the centuries is thinking that they have to find a man and support his success. So just, getting married and then putting all their emotional energy, their spiritual energy into propping up their partner, and then he will make, the money and then give her the money. And so this has created this unhealthy codependent dynamic in the whole society, because it's instead of two whole people showing up and creating, having their own independence, while of course being, in the natural masculine, leading and feminine sort of flowing dynamic. But instead of showing up independently, we created this codependent dynamic where women have been giving up their power and their ability to generate income, and then needing to, hold their hand out and be like, okay, can I get my, money? Can you provide for me? So this actually has disempowered women. And I used to think that it was, very advantageous to just have, a provider guy, and have, a man, if you were smart enough, to get a guy who's successful and he can provide for you, that would be beneficial. But it's actually disempowering in the sense that you're outsourcing your independence to somebody else. So women who get into these relationships, they then have to, depend on their good behavior, or their pleasing a guy, even having to, outsource their sexuality to man in order to have their needs provided for. And one of the things I feel very strongly about is, for us divine feminine taking our power back, is that we need to separate our sensuality and our sexuality from this monetary control. And I know that, for some women, it's a step in doing that. So some women, they find it empowering to use the sexuality to generate income, because you make really good money. So I don't judge this. It's not personally for me, but I think that the next level in our true empowerment is moving beyond needing to use sexuality to create money, rather just knowing you can use your spiritual gifts, your emotional gifts to create money. And because our society has been so patriarchal and we've valued just the physical and the material, women have not realized that we actually create abundance a lot more powerfully than just these physical things, like working and putting in energy into the physical, and the putting in hours at work. When a woman is with a man, she actually gives him a lot of this ethereal emotional energy that helps him to manifest more money. So that's something that we need to value, is just because you cannot see it, there doesn't mean it does not have the same amount of value, or not more, not, even more value than the physical. Because when a woman, especially a very highly evolved woman who's in touch with her spiritual nature, that energy makes millionaires. That energy makes a man step into his ability to create abundance. So actually, we are interdependent on each other. The masculine needs that feminine energy in order to drive his physical work, and then also we as the feminine benefit from having that masculine grounding stability. So the next theme I want to talk about is the body and our physical appearance. So a lot of ancestral trauma with the divine feminine is the way that we look and our bodies. So because in the past, for many traditions, many nationalities, ethnicities, women basically had to marry into their abundance, or they had to depend on how they look to manifest a partner rather than their internal self. This has created a lot of negative pressure on the divine feminine, how we feel about ourselves, how we look. A lot of women, and this is why so many women, end up just going for just doing like the stripping or sugar daddy, whatever, because they've identified with, my success and abundance is in how I look, in my body. And that's so just limiting, in the sense that, yes, use your body, use your beauty, your sensuality. It's an amazing thing when you harness that, but when you do it from a place of empowerment, not, this mutual exploitation where you're using, the body to get something from a guy, and then he's also using his finances to get something from you, or his power. So this old model of just the masculine and feminine exploiting each other really is on its way out, I feel. So part of this is we really have to heal as women this trauma of putting so much attention into how we look, and almost fearing, like I see women, and just like I've experienced this feeling of just like, my beauty is so important, how I look, like people treat me so well because of how I look and all these things. And it's not about the fear of, I can't have that. I think it's super beautiful, and it's part of our feminine nature to adorn ourselves and to look beautiful, and we can have that in a very long longevity way. We can keep that. But if we keep that attachment to the physical, we end up suffering. So we have to move beyond that trauma and heal that ancestral trauma of, if I'm not beautiful, I will not attract a man to provide for me, or I won't be able to get married, or I won't be able to, have people respect me, because just women in the past have been so marginalized and just commodified, right? And another part of this comes down to youth, right? So with yogic practices, you actually can keep your youthfulness and your appearance for way beyond what the collective thinks. But it's important not to allow society to devalue you just because of your age, because a lot of people, just have had this negative conception of just like, oh, that's it. Like once you turn 25 or 30 or whatever, that's it, you go down. And that's a pretty toxic belief, because, if the average lifespan is going to be 60, 70, 80 years of age, like that's a long time, to be devaluing yourself and your beauty. So I don't believe in giving up on your looks or not attending to them. I believe in doing everything you can to maintain your beauty and your radiance, but I believe that it's super important not to identify and define yourself as just your physical beauty. Another part of this healing the physical body has to do, of course, with sexual trauma. So unfortunately, because a lot of our ancestors have been forced to marry, for financial benefit, or a lot of us actually have ancestry of women who were prostitutes or in some way, had to exchange sexuality for material goods. That's something really important to look at and heal as well. Just even thinking about wars, how many of our ancestors, women, people going to wars, women experiencing sexual violence. It's not, it should be disconcerting for people, the fact that so many women still complain about the ability or the inability to orgasm. And sometimes this could be from ancestral trauma or just things. Whatever we experience in this life is usually a replay of our past lives and our ancestry. So it's very important to be able to go deep into the body and do these spiritual practices or do anything that goes into the subconscious, like the hypnosis, and uproot and take out these traumas related to our physical body. Every woman should be in the place where her body is just radiant. When a woman's really healed, her body just is like a microcosm of the universe. Like it just looks heavenly, like it looks appealing, regardless of what it physically looks like. When you're really healed, your body just looks, it has this special beauty to it, and that comes from that deep level of healing, self-acceptance, and the energy that radiates beyond the physical and creates and shapes the physical. Another part of this that I think is really important for us to address is this social paradigm that's been created where we've been taught to be very competitive and have animosity towards other women. And people have almost created this mass hypnosis brainwashing where women have started to accept, like, well, that's just how women are, and it's not how we are. The large majority of dysfunction that we experience is social programming. It's mass hypnosis. People telling you something over and over and over, and then you begin to repeat it internally and accept it as reality. There's absolutely no reason why one gender would have more jealousy or competitiveness than another, other than social programming. So as I mentioned before with this whole financial thing, because women have had to basically show their value based on their appearance, because they weren't allowed to work or vote for till recently, it's been just like so much emphasis on the beauty. So what happens, like, women meet other women and that's their marketplace competition. So it's really deep ancestral stuff that when you begin to address it and heal it, something really magical happens. You actually begin to see other women as you would see a sister. So most people, a blood sister or blood relative doesn't evoke that type of jealousy. Not all cases, of course, but in general you don't. Why? Because there's this general love, right? It's like, well, I love this person, so I want them to be happy too. And you just don't think that way. So when we heal this ancestral trauma, we start seeing other women as we would see a sister who's blood related, even though they're not. And you begin to just appreciate other women's beauty. You start looking at other women as art, and especially the more that the divine feminine heals this paradigm, the more that people are going to understand, like, there's a million dudes to go around. Like, there's no reason to be in this fear. And so the more women, stop falling for these divide and conquer games, and we actually come together and see that the same way men can have, this brotherhood and this bro culture, where they're not necessarily competing every little thing. Some dudes are when they're in their ego, but women can have that exact same paradigm where they also can have, friendship, sisterhood, and not feel that fear, that ancestral fear that's like, oh, she's gonna take my man away, she's gonna take my resources away, blah, blah, blah. You begin to think more with abundance mentality, like, there's plenty of resources, or I generate my own resources, so I'm not afraid of losing it, or I'm beautiful, there's plenty of men to go around, I'm not scared. It becomes just super freeing when you heal this type of ancestral trauma. Finally, I want to talk about the general theme of freedom, independence, and movement. Just women actually being free to do things. So a lot of our ancestral trauma, if you think about it, it really hasn't been that long since we've had some very basic rights, just like the right to vote or the right to work. What was it, like women didn't really start getting active in the workplace until there was like a war and they needed nurses, you know, just even things of like what you're allowed to wear, you know, you can wear this, but you can't wear this or else you're slutty, you know, stuff like that that's really restricted our femininity and our sensuality. We really need to undo and deprogram within ourselves. You should never take into account when you're getting dressed, what will somebody judge me as or whatever. You know, we have to follow certain, you know, rules and laws, like we can't go out naked in the street, but it's very important that you dress with, you know, just what makes me feel good. Not this idea of dressing for will I look better than someone else or whatever, you know, ego-based things, but just dressing with, I feel good in this, so I'm deciding, you know, it's your decision. It's not up to, I'm sorry, but it's not up to, you know, a husband or a boyfriend to tell you what to wear. That's really an infringement on a woman's freedom, and it's really up to women. And the funny thing is, a lot of the times as women we rebel, and you know, I used to like purposefully want to dress more provocatively just to be like, you can't tell me what to wear. But once you actually go deep into your own freedom of it, you stop being so, you know, dressing in protest, and more just you dress in what naturally feels good and sensual to you. And then it'll be, you know, not necessarily something that would be super provocative, but whatever it is, it's your choice. And I recommend to wear things that show off your body, make you look beautiful in a classy, sexy way, and not to worry about what someone else thinks about that. So freedom with what you wear. And then also, some of us have a lot of ancestral trauma just from the freedom to move around, to go out, to be in positions of leadership at work, to do things where, you know, it might not have been okay in the past. Like, it's okay for you to have a lot of money. It's okay for you to travel freely. It's okay to date a lot of men at one time before you're committed. It's okay to all these things that society has tricked, you know, women into giving their power away from. Well, men will do the same thing, but, you know, women get disempowered and told you can't do this, da da da. Along with this, I want to mention that there's this popular idea that, you know, this patriarchal society has created, that men are naturally more polyamorous. You know, they use a lot of these pseudoscience studies, and by the way, scientific studies, they're done by human scientists, and they're influenced by the way they are already carrying their own preconceptions and their way that they think. So you can find a study proving anything, you know, left or right, this and that, because you're coming from logic, from the mind. And the true truth and reality comes from beyond the mind. It comes from this intuitive knowing, this divine intelligence, which is that consciousness, which is what people talk about when they say, I made a gut decision, or I made, you know, I felt this thing. And that's feminine energy. So because our society has only valued the masculine, we think that, you know, you only gotta give credence or validity to things that are logical, like scientific studies and whatever. But we gotta start valuing more this feminine ability to see that, you know, our intuition, our emotional feelings, our psychic gifts, these things are real. You know, they're proven time and again. There's tons of records in history of these famous astrologers, famous psychics that world leaders would go to. But yet people still doubt it because they have this biased thinking. So what I'm talking about with this, these pseudoscience studies, is they try to tell us that as women, you know, they're trying to program us to believe that as a woman, you're naturally only going to want one guy. But, you know, a guy, it's okay for him to have a lot of partners, and that's just how he's programmed. And this could be super deceptively disempowering for women, because then women think, you know, if a woman's with a guy and she really loves him, but he has several partners and, you know, she's being more committed, she's like, well, you know, this is how they are, whatever. But it's not a biological thing. It's literally just socially programmed. If a man wanted to be unfaithful, he didn't have to suffer consequences the way a woman would. You know, a man could have mistresses, especially men who are, you know, royalty, whatever. They could have harems, they could do all these things. And a lot of women have this ancestral trauma of being in these harems and being in these super exploitative dynamics and giving their power away because we didn't have that financial empowerment. So it's super important that we reclaim this financial power, heal this ancestral trauma, but also to dehypnotize ourselves from this nonsense pseudoscience that the patriarchy has shoved down our throats and down into our minds, that, you know, men are like this, women are like this. If that was true, you would not be seeing, you know, infidelity on both sides, you know. Even just things with sexuality, right? Like it's not until recently that people even acknowledged that women had sexual desire or that women could orgasm and all these things. And we still have a bit of a ways to go, but thank God it's getting better and the playing field is evening out. So we no longer have these crazy insecure men trying to suppress and squish and quash women's sexual freedom because they want to, you know, have their cake and eat it too, but keep a woman waiting for them and brainwash them into thinking that that's how they are. So the truth is we as humans have monogamous and polyamorous traits, and it's really just a personal decision and depending on the seasons and cycles of where you are in your life. And so it's really important that we just take back the way we think and heal that trauma of, you know, needing to accept this masculine structure of thought and all this programming that's going to give us a lot of freedom and healing to become powerful women that are on an even playing field with the masculine. So that's mostly what I wanted to talk about. I know there's like so many other things that can go into this with ancestral trauma. We're talking about centuries of just programming in the body, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about this in the comments. If you've intuitively had any experiences, maybe past life regressions, or just things you feel where you know, you felt limited. It could be maybe you come from a family where there's, you know, arranged marriages or things like that. So anything where you feel that you might need more healing from that type of ancestral trauma as a woman. And if you guys resonate with this and you feel called to do deeper work with this, I do one-on-one coaching and I do a lot of this regression and this internal deprogramming and freeing work. So you guys can find that information on my website. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.